Real quick before I put this up, I guess somebody messed with my camera settings and now the camera quality is not the greatest, but the information is still good, so I'm gonna put this video up. I got a couple of videos like this, but like I said, the information's still good, so I think I'm gonna put it up anyway. Hello there, people of the internet. Interesting topic for us to discuss today. I was asked what my opinion was on the future of military surplus. And I think I'm going to go ahead and cover this in a couple of different parts because there's different variations of military surplus out there. Whenever somebody asks me this, way more often than not, they're asking about, say, Mausers, or Lee Enfields, or Mosin Nagants, something like this right here. They're asking about the stereotypical things that most of us think of whenever it comes to military surplus rifles. The big three. Lee Enfield, Mosin, and Mauser rifles. And unfortunately, those rifles have pretty much become collectibles. A lot of the firearms that are of that genre of rifle have come to us from other countries that have surplus their old military surplus rifles because they have moved on to newer and better technology. Odds are they swapped out those old school wood and steel bolt action guns for something that looks a lot like what I have right here. Or, I don't know, maybe something that looks a lot like what I have right here. But bottom line, it's older technology. They decided that they didn't need it, so they swap it out for a newer one, and then they sell off the old surplus. And by a pretty huge margin, most countries have already done that with their old school military surplus. And why that sucks is because the countries that sell off these old wood and steel surplus guns that they've had in inventory, those old guns tend to be in quite good condition. Not all of the time, but most of the time they tend to be in quite good condition because whenever they are putting them in storage, anything that needs to be serviced or refurbished or redone or rebuilt, they do that before they pack everything up and put it into storage. So the countries that have already surplus the things out, basically every country that had access to these firearms has already done that. With any real notable amounts, that's already been done. So everything that is a Mosin, Mauser, or Enfield that is in relatively good shape that you're going to find on the market is going to be through private sales. And as a result of that, the market dictates the price. And that is why we see these military surplus guns getting such a massively high bump in prices. Now, it is likely that some conflicts around the world are going to end up ceasing, and we're going to start to see some of the old military surplus that was used in those conflicts, that was recycled through the eras, start to make its way into the country, assuming that embargoes don't stop it. But I don't think we're going to see anything real significant or notable compared to what we have seen before. Maybe if embargoes lift, we might see something, but I don't really foresee that happening. So the only way that you're going to find military surplus that is of good condition, that is not being brought in by other countries like what we have seen in the past, is to find it on the private market, and that's why things are so much more expensive than they were. Now, another way that we might see some military surplus come into the market is if we see things coming out of, say, places where the firearms were used as war aid or reparations or something among that nature, and as a result of that, most of the time they're not going to be very well taken care of. We see that with a lot of things coming out of Africa and Ethiopia. There's a whole lot of military surplus out there that's on the market, and these things are dirt cheap in comparison to what the market is asking for. But that's because these things are in really, really bad shape, and that's because they were given out as war aid and reparations, and they were not stored very well. And I think we're going to see in the future some more of that come into the country, just discoveries of piles of things that are laying in bunkers or barns or in fields covered in dirt and weeds or wherever it is that they're going to be finding these things. They're not going to be in what's the word I'm looking for? Well taken care of storage areas, and they're not going to be things that were upkept by countries who kept them as legitimate surplus in the event that they needed backup guns.
We might find piles of Mosins or Mausers or Enfields laying around somewhere, but they're going to be in pretty rough shape. And I think that by a pretty huge margin, most of the surplus that we're going to see in the future is probably going to be based around something like this. This is a Setme C308, and this is actually built off of a Spanish parts kit from their Setme rifles. It was done by Century, and I think that we're going to see a lot more instances of things like this happening, where parts kits end up getting imported by some manufacturer, and they manufacture them into civilian legal semi-auto, semi-automatic rifles. Not anything that is full auto, but so that's simply because of U.S. law and whatnot. But I think we're going to see a lot of parts kit builds, just because there's a lot of military surplus out there that can't be sold on the U.S. market because of how modern manufacturing and modern firearms are made for military purposes, and United States law not allowing civilians to have that. So I think we're going to see a lot of parts kit builds, and we're probably going to see a lot of things like this. It doesn't necessarily have to be just military surplus. This is a Smith & Wesson, a SW40VE, and this was actually an LEO trade-in, and boy, this thing definitely saw a lot of use. Must have come straight out of Los Angeles or something. But I think that we're going to see a lot of military surplus handguns on the market at some point, especially once we see, like, say, the United States military surplus out its Beretta 92s, or all of the law enforcement moving away from 40 Smith & Wesson back to 9mm or whatever it is that their particular agency decides to go with. I think that we're going to see a lot of handguns on the market just because a lot of these right here tend to be semi-automatic, and a lot of them tend to be legal in most places for most U.S. civilians to be able to buy. So just to summarize, law enforcement and trade and stuff, probably going to see a lot of that in the future. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't see that. We're probably going to see a lot of parts kits, especially as conflicts around the world begin to die down and certain things start to find themselves onto the market. I'm trying to pick my words very carefully here for YouTube purposes. I think we're going to see a lot of parts kit builds as U.S. companies start to get them for dirt cheap and build them on semi-auto receivers and sell them off to the populace. And I think that we're going to see in the future, potentially, any other piles of old school wood and steel rifles like what we got right here. They might be found at wherever it is that they're kept, but they're not going to be in all that great of condition by by a pretty huge margin. Countries that were looking to surplus out their rifles from, their World War II era or earlier rifles. They've pretty much already done that, and so all those guns that were taken care of are no longer on that market. As a matter of fact, I think that Italy was one of the last holdouts, and they've very recently started surplusing out their Carcano rifles, and that's one of the reasons why you see so many of these out there on the market right now, just because that right there is one of the last little batches of World War II surplus that we're going to see. So there we go. That's pretty much the future of military surplus. I guess I can go ahead and say in the future, I doubt that we'll see very many people chasing after things that aren't Mosins, Mausers, and Enfields. I think those are going to be the things that most people go after. But there's other things that you can look for. Like this right here is not a Mauser that we normally think of. This is a 7184 Mauser. It's an old school black powder rifle. And you should be able to find something like this for not as much money as, say, a Car 98 would run for. Still more money than I'd like to pay for it, but not as much money as, say, a Car 98 would sell for. Or there's old school, like what I got right here. This is a trapdoor Springfield in 4570. The prices on these really haven't raised all that much over the past bunch of years, and that's because the people who know about them and want them pretty much already have them. There's a bunch of them that are out there on the market. It's not exactly a rare firearm to find, but I don't think that the prices on those are going to fluctuate all that much, just because most people aren't really paying attention to that sort of stuff. So there's my 2 cents. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below is a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you on the next episode.
while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.